A short story by Paul McCann. Santa and the Goodie Gangsters. It was 12 days before Christmas, and Santa lookalikes were in every major city stores getting photos taken with children and spreading goodwill out there in the public. Meanwhile, the real Santa was getting things ready for the big day in the village of Still Believin' in his North Pole home. All over the world, people were decorating Christmas trees, and children were writing their letters to Santa. It was an exciting time for most people with innocent hearts. There were a few exceptions, like the Gangsters from Hammerhead, who had decided that they were going to cash in on Christmas by grabbing Santa and holding him hostage until the ransom money was paid. With very little planning done, these four low-down, no-good, greedy gangsters made their way to the North Pole. They had hired a plane to take them and to wait for them until they brought their hostage. When the plane landed, Mo, Joe, Naylor and Topper stepped off and began walking through the snow until they found a sign that said Toy Town. After a long walk, the four gangsters arrived in Toy Town, only to find it was closed due to Christmas deliveries. So they walked around in circles for a while until they decided to get out of the cold and break into one of the toy factories until they decided what to do next. A group of reindeers had seen the gangsters breaking in and quietly went over to check out what they were up to. Inside the factory, the gangsters were talking about their job. Mo said, "I reckon he must be near this place. After all, he has to load up the sleigh with all those toys. So I reckon we just wait here until he comes. Then we grab him." Topper spoke next. "Once we have him, we'll cut off his beard and send bits to the police and ask for the money, or they'll never hear him ho 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 again." They all laughed, and Naylor said, "Well, I'll burn that sleigh of his as well and take video footage of that and send it to the TV networks just to show them that we're really serious about this." Mo said, "I can't imagine all the news channels. Can you just picture it now? No ho ho ho. Santa's held hostage." They all chuckled and laughed. Outside, the group of reindeers were listening to every word that was being said, and they raced off at speed to tell Santa about the danger he was in. As soon as the reindeers arrived in Still Believing Village, they began screaming and shouting. Prancer ran around and around, stomping his feet. "Come out, everyone! There's trouble in Toyland!" Dancer was jumping up high in the air and yelling out, "Quick! Come quick! There are gangsters here, and we need to help Santa quick!" Rudolph's nose was glowing bright red on alert, and he began to whistle over and over with a whelp until all the elves came running out to help. A small army of little elves rushed out of their little houses, chanting a war cry. "Oi, oi, 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 Oscar McCann! Ow, 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 Oscar McCann! Ow, ow, Oscar McCann! Ow, ow!" With all this commotion and carry-on, Santa soon arrived to see what the problem was.
"Ho, ho, 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 my goodness, whatever is the matter?" he said.
All the reindeers tried to tell Santa, but they were so anxious
that they stuttered and muttered and fluttered and spluttered. The elves were still chanting their war cry, and now the noise was becoming so intense that the snow shook from all the roofs of the rooftops. Santa closed his eyes, and then he lifted one hand in the air and the other, and he quickly brought them together with the sound of a loud clap that echoed all over the village. After that there was silence, and peace again returned.
Santa, some bad men are trying to take you hostage.
Santa looked at Rudolph with his nose almost on fire, and he smiled and softly replied,
The truth is, my four-legged and fleet-footed friend, there is no such thing as a bad man. Inside every bad man is an innocent child just waiting for a chance to come out and play again. Come with me and let me show you.
Santa waved his hands over his head in a circle 3 times and said,
Jacket of snow come, it's December.
Suddenly the wind began to whirl around and around, lifting into a snow funnel that spun and took everyone there, including Santa, outside to the spot where the 4 gangsters were. And as the snow funnel stopped spinning, Santa and all those with him made their way into the building. Caught up by surprise, Mo, Joe, Naylor, and Topper rushed over to grab Santa, but they were overpowered by the elves, who surrounded them and tied them up by their hands and feet.
Untie me or you'll be sorry,
said Naylor.
Ho, 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 don't you know? It's time to be at peace with the world, Naylor, or have you forgotten?
Santa put his big arms around Naylor and gave him a hug. The ties around Naylor fell off. Naylor screamed out, and Santa laughed.
Ho, 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 ho!
Santa looked deeply into Naylor's eyes and put his hand on his head, and he said,
Naylor. Or can I call you by your right name? Robert, isn't it? That's right. Robert Taylor. I can still see the little note you wrote to me a long time ago with a picture you drew me of a choo-choo train with 8 carriages on a track. And that's just what you asked for, isn't it?
Naylor began to giggle and laugh.
Yes, Santa. That's right. I did draw a picture. Did you get the apple and carrot I left for your reindeers that night?
Santa reached inside his big red coat and handed Robert a toy train set with 8 carriages. The gangster became a child again and screamed,
Well, thanks, Santa. That's just what I asked for.
All the other 3 gangsters burst out laughing, and they all began to make fun of Naylor, who was oblivious to the cruel words being thrown at him.
Naylor? Hey, tough guy, what's going on? Listen to him, Naylor, have you gone mad?
Robert, can we all play with you and your choo-choo?
Robert replied in a kind, childlike voice.
Don't you know it's Christmas, boys? Look, see what I got. It's a brand new choo-choo.
They all looked at Naylor with their mouths wide open. One of the gangsters, Joe, walked over and looked Naylor right in the eyes. Santa looked at Joe and went over and put his arms around him, giving him a big bear hug, and all the ties around Naylor fell off. And Joe as well. And they both stood there, Santa didn't let go. He kept squeezing Joe.
Let me go, fatso! Ho, 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 no, Joe, ho, ho, ho.
What about you then, or should I call you Martin? I still remember finding that letter you wrote to me, asking for a fire engine truck with flashing lights and a noisy siren. Joe's face began to light up, and there was an innocence in his voice as he began to talk.
Yes, Santa. That's right. You brought me that fire truck.
Santa reached inside his big red coat and took out a toy fire truck and handed it to Martin, who jumped for joy.
Thanks, Santa. That's great. That's the one I've always wanted.
Two of the gangsters stood there, stunned, lost for words. Mo went over and looked at Joe and said,
Listen to Fireman Joe Topper. I'm thinking he's burned out.
Santa went over and took Mo by the hand and said,
Ho, ho, ho now. What do you know, Mo?
See, the thing is, nobody knows but old Santa here all about that Christmas stocking you left at the end of your bed and the bar of chocolates that you left for me too.
Oh, isn't that so, Mo?
Or should I say, Tom?
Yeah, that's true. Now, I do remember that, Santa. How did you know that?
Santa remembers everything, Tom. Even you, when you were naughty and when you were nice. Tom smiled and softly asked,
How do you know all these things, Santa?
How do I know? Well, Santa can do lots of magic stuff like get down chimneys and fly through the sky with reindeers in a sleigh and even travel all over the world in a single day, Tom. It's just part of what I do. I even remember the toy army tank you asked me for in your letter.
Santa gave him a hug. All the ties fell off Mo. Then he reached down and said his bag. Yeah, where is that thing?
There it is.
And he handed it over to Tom. A big toy tank. Tom screamed in delight.
Thanks a lot, Santa. That's the tiger tank I've asked you for.
Topper stood there, looking at his 3 gang members playing with their toys on the ground. All their ties were off, as if they were kids again. Santa went over and put his arms around Topper, and all the ties fell off.
Oh, so, Topper, I remember the letters you sent. Yeah, they were always interesting little stories about what was going on in your life. I always look forward to your letters every year. They brought me joy and laughter to hear about your dad's old car that never started in the cold mornings and your mother's washing line that fell down when the wind was strong. And your brother, who had no idea how to whistle.
Topper stood there, astonished, and looked at Santa and began to speak with a kind of a lilt and a whisper.
Yeah, that's right. I did all that. I completely forgot about that, Santa.
Santa put his hand on Topper's head and said, I've kept every one of your letters, Topper. Or can I call you Bob? Topper nodded.
Sure, Santa. Did my letters really make you laugh?
Santa replied.
Ho, ho, my word, they did. I laughed until I almost burst.
Topper began to laugh himself, and the two of them stood there, bent over, laughing for a few minutes.
Oh, that's so funny, Santa. I can't remember the last time I laughed so much.
Well, I do, Bob. And it was the time when you were climbing up a ladder to get a ball from a tall tree. And you got pins and needles in your feet, and you couldn't move up or down, so you had to stand there halfway up the ladder for 10 minutes in a fit of laughter. And when you finally got the ball, it was already burst. I know it because you wrote it to me in a letter and told me all about it, and asked if I could bring you a new ball for Christmas.
Santa reached inside his big red coat, and he took out a leather skin ball and handed it to Bob. The excitement on Bob's face almost glowed as he bounced the ball and said,
It's brilliant. That's the same one I asked you for, the one that got burst.
For a few moments, Santa, the elves, and the reindeers watched all of the gangsters having fun with their toys. And then he said,
Ho, 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 and away we gotta go!
With that command, a magic sleigh appeared from nowhere, and once all the reindeers were hitched up, he called the 4 gangsters over.
Hey, boys, fancy a ride in Santa's sleigh?
One by one, each of the gangsters all ran into the sleigh with the toy Santa had given them. In a few moments they were airborne, landing briefly at the spot where their plane was. And Santa got out of the sleigh and he went over and he spoke to the pilot who was patiently waiting for his passengers and the cargo.
Whoa, ho, hello! Hey, Alan, isn't it? Yes, however did you grow up so fast?
The pilot looked at Santa, and his thoughts were transported back to his childhood days.
Santa, is that really you?
Yes, it really is, Alan, and you haven't changed a bit now.
Here's a little something you wanted me to get for you. Santa reached inside his big red coat, and he took out a toy airplane and handed it to Alan, who screamed with excitement.
Thanks, Santa. It's the toy plane I asked for, all right.
Santa then explained to Alan that he would be bringing his passengers home, and in a few moments he would return to his pilot job again and return back home remembering nothing of the experience. Then Santa got back into the sleigh and he shouted,
Ho, 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 and away we go!
The reindeers and the sleigh lifted off into the night sky, and when they landed again they were back in Hammerhead. When the 4 Goodie gangsters got out from the sleigh, Santa patted every one of them on their head and said,
Okay, you can all be childlike for another day or two, or maybe even a month or more. It all depends on if you change your ways, and you know Santa knows everything, so you better be good because I'm watching.
He looked at Topper, Naylor, Mo, and Joe, and then he said,
Ho, 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 it's time to go. So everybody, goodbye, and have a Merry Christmas.
Santa then disappeared into the night sky. The end.